What's up, guys? Thank you for your questions, and as always, leave any new questions you have at the bottom of this post, and don't forget to like all the other questions that you would like answered. So let's get started. Thomas Donovan asks, is it good to rewatch shows in your active immersion in the same way that you would continuously replay the same shows you've already seen in passive immersion? Or is it better to always be looking for new material to actively immerse with? Well, I think that more than anything else, what matters most when it comes to active immersion is your level of engagement. So, if regardless of how comprehensible something is or how much repetition you're getting, really the fact that you're totally engaged and focused and trying to understand as much as you can and not zoning out, that is what is going to determine the quality of your input more than anything else. And so then the question becomes, well, is there benefit of repeatedly watching the same thing? And I think there might be, because of course, the more time you spend with any one thing, the more detail you tend to notice in it. So it could be that if you watch the same episode of a TV show actively 2 or 3 times within a short period of time, then you end up taking more away than you would just watching different things each time. But I think that for most people, actively watching the same thing multiple times within a short span of time is going to be extremely boring and make it extremely difficult to be fully engaged and having fun with your immersion. And I think that the downside of this is definitely going to outweigh whatever potential benefit you would take from that repetition. And so for me, I never actively watched things multiple times unless I either really liked it or I almost understood all of it, and I was just kind of felt like, oh, I feel like if I watched it one more time, I could really get the whole thing. And I was motivated to try to have that a clearer understanding. Sometimes I would, but I would never do it purely out of a sense of obligation or like, oh, I should watch it again because that would be good for me and I want to do what's best for me. It was never really like that. And I think that's a good way to go about it, is if you actually feel like you want to, then go ahead and do it. But never try to force yourself to do it because that's what's going to be most efficient or something, because it's not that big of a deal either way, whether you're just watching new stuff all the time or watching stuff that the same thing multiple times. Even if getting repetition is beneficial, it's a small benefit. And like I said, your engagement matters more than anything else. And if you are the type of person who, for whatever reason, just really loves repetition and you actually would prefer to watch the same thing over and over and over rather than watch different things, and this really isn't taking any extra willpower, then I would still say try to cut it off after 3 times, because after you've watched the same thing 3 times, you've probably taken everything away from it that you can take away at your current level, and you are better off going and immersing with something else. Because a lot of times learning through immersion comes down to you coming across the perfect sentence or phrase or paragraph to help your mind realize the next thing it needs to realize, to understand the next grammatical structure it was ready to acquire, or notice the next word that you are going to start hearing all the time. And so if you've watched the same thing 3 times, then, you've sucked everything out of it that you can at your current level. And it could be that you'd actually be better going and immersing with different stuff, so you have a wider range of language that you're exposing your mind to, so that there's a higher likelihood that you're going to come across the perfect sentence or phrase to unlock the next thing. And so to summarize, I would say engagement matters more than anything else. So never force yourself to repeat the same things in active immersion multiple times. Only do it when you feel like it, because there might be some benefit to it. But even if you're going to do it multiple times because you're motivated to, or you actually like it, still cut it off after 3 times, because otherwise you are risking kind of stunting your growth by not exposing yourself to the specific, whatever chunk of language that your brain really needs to hear next. And I would say that that's the nice thing about the way that I talk about passive immersion, is you get to benefit from repetition without having to bore yourself in a way, because it's a lot easier to repeatedly listen to the same stuff in the background while you're doing other stuff like cooking and cleaning than it is to sit down and just watch the same thing twice in a row, because that's actually extremely boring. So William Underwood asks, I'm struggling to determine my level with respect to the MIA level distinction. It'd be great to hear a summary of a learner's capabilities at each level. For example, when one reaches functional, what does that entail? What kind of content are they capable of comprehending, and to what extent? How might the language feel compared to the earlier stages? Okay, so this is something that I'm planning on writing a lot about on the website very soon, but I haven't yet, obviously, so I'll give a kind of short summary now of what I'm planning to write. So about a month ago, or maybe more than a month ago at this point, I wrote, definitely more than a month ago, maybe a few months ago, I wrote this really long post on the website called the 6-Point Model of Language Ability. And in this post, I broke down language ability into different kind of components, different aspects, and then I talked about how we can think about what level someone is at in each of those aspects. And the main reason why I decided to create this model and write that post is so that I can come up with a clear answer to the question of what level am I at? How do I know when I'm done with this level and on the next one? How good will I be at each level? Because there wasn't really any clear way to talk about language ability, at least not in my opinion, not in a way clear enough for this purpose. And so in that model, I broke language into spoken language ability and then written language ability, and then each of those into 6 further categories. And so to get on to actually answering your question, the way that MIA works and the way that immersion learning should work in general is that there's kind of 3 stages. The first stage is you're learning how to understand the language. Then the second stage is you can understand the language and you're continuing and to receive input that you're understanding and building up your output potential, absorbing how the language actually works and what how people tend to say things, what type of things they tend to say. And then the last stage is you have absorbed enough of the language and you actually start learning how to produce it yourself and you start outputting. And so the first couple stages are really all about learning how to understand your input and then getting lots of input that you understand. And so up until stage 4, when you start outputting, then all you're really worried about is how much can I understand? Now, of course, there's the balanced approach and the perfectionist approach. And within the balanced approach, it's set up so that if your goal is only to get to stage 3 and then retire, then you start outputting earlier than if your goal is to get to stage 4 or higher, in which case you would wait until stage 4 to output. And so there's a lot of different variables in order to make it customizable to different people. But I'm just going to be talking about the most kind of fundamental basic approach to MIA for the sake of clarity, which would be you're doing the balanced path and you're trying to get to stage 5 or higher in the end, which means that you're going to start outputting in stage 4. So what this means is that for the first 3 stages, all you're really concerned with is how much can you understand. And so if you go and look at the 6-point model of language ability, all you really have to look at is the comprehension aspect, because in both spoken language and written language, I have one aspect of ability is just called comprehension, and then I've broken down comprehension ability for each written and then spoken language into 10 levels, 10 being hypothetically the highest level that humans reach, and then defined in detail what is the difference between each of those levels. And so I'll put a link to that in the description to the post and the rubric. But what I would say is that you have finished stage 1 in the balanced path when you have when you've done all the steps that I list in the overview, and also you have a comprehension level of 3. And then you've finished stage 2 again when you finished all of the different things that are listed in the overview, and you have at least a level 4 ability of comprehension. And then you finish stage 3 when, again, all that, and you have level 5 of ability of comprehension. And then stage 4, the goal of stage 4 is to achieve solid fluency, right? When you finish stage 4, you should be able to be considered fluent in the language. And in the post, the 6-point model of language ability, I actually define what fluency looks like in all 6 of the categories. And comprehension, it's a 6. But then I also go into detail about what the other categories are. So if you're wondering about that, then go check out the post. And then I haven't really defined stage 5 yet, or how you know how you know that you finished stage 4 and go on to stage 5. It's a little bit tricky because the higher level you get, the more that your ability is going to spread out. Like the more variation there's going to be between people, because people are going to focus on different aspects of their ability in a different order and have different priorities. But hopefully that answers your question for now, because I'm assuming that you're in somewhere probably between stage 1 and 4. So yeah. Renfred Harper asks, I've heard people say that trying to speak with a flat accent, no high, low intonation, sounds better to natives than speaking with pitch accent that is completely wrong or inconsistent. What are your thoughts on this, and tips for people who might not want to put in the effort to strive for native level pitch accent but still want to sound decent accent-wise? So the thing you have to remember is that a lot of advice that you hear floating around when it comes to learning Japanese are targeted towards traditional language learners. So these are people who would go to a language class, get a textbook, try to brute force memorize the first 200-300 kanji, and then start outputting from day one based off of grammar rules and translating in their head. So you're at the boku no namae wa mato desu, boku wa nihongo o benkyou shitemasu, and that type of stuff. And so the entire Japanese curriculum that you get if you go to take a Japanese class or you buy a mainstream Japanese textbook like Genki, they're all targeted towards those type of people. And the mindset of the authors of the textbook are, these people are not going to get that good anyway. They're always going to suck. So how do we get them the best bang for their buck for the little amount of time they're going to put in? And this is why they teach you the mas forms first, because it's even though logically it doesn't really make sense to teach you des and mas forms before you learn the formal forms, because from a grammatical perspective, those are modified forms, and the basic and the casual stuff is the actual most fundamental forms of the words and the conjugations and stuff. It's because they're not really thinking about in terms of, if you wanted to learn the whole language, what would be the most logical way to go about it? They're just thinking, okay, these people are only going to end up with one chunk of the language anyway, most likely. So we might as well give them the most useful chunk, which is polite language. Because that way, if you go to Tokyo and you ask for directions on the street, you'll at least be polite, right? It's better to be polite than rude or casual, right? It's better to be polite all the time, even when you should be casual, than to be casual all the time, even when you should be polite. And so if you're actually planning on reaching a high level of fluency, this advice doesn't apply to you, right? You shouldn't learn the polite forms first, because it actually is going to make it more confusing and take longer to learn all of grammar, because you're starting with level 2 and ignoring level 1. But and so it makes more sense to actually just start at the ground up and then build it up from there. And that's what Take Him does. One sec. And the thing is, with all this advice you hear about speaking Japanese flat, it's targeted towards these type of people. And you wrote in your question that speaking flat sounds better to natives than speaking with pitch accent. That is wrong. But I'm pretty sure that this isn't the advice. I'm pretty sure the advice is just with intonation in general. Because I've read this advice as well. I know that Katsumoto talked about it in an article. It doesn't mention pitch accent specifically. It's just saying, maybe it is. I'm not totally sure. That doesn't really matter. But the thing is that it's pretty much complete bullshit, right? It's not, that advice is for people who would otherwise end up talking like this. Boku no namae wa matto desu. Sushi ga oishii desu ne. It's when there's someone like that and you tell them, hey, just try to speak flat, it'll make you sound better. It's true. It'll make the person sound better, right? If they're just boku no namae wa matto desu. Boku wa suki desu ne. Sushi ga suki desu ne. It's yeah, okay, it improved a little bit. They're trying to keep it flat. But if you're talking about getting to any decent level of fluency at all, then this advice does not apply at all. Dogen actually just uploaded a video where he kind of makes fun of this piece of advice, where he, he's speaking Japanese and he says a word with a pitch accent wrong, and then in the little skit, a native corrects him and is oh no, it's not this, it's this. Japanese is flat. And then he starts speaking actually flat, and it sounds ridiculous, so desu ka? Ja kore kara nihongo furatto ni hanashimasu. And then the joke is that the pitch accent of the word flat is actually not flat. It's not furatto, it's furatto. And so then he points out that even the word flat isn't flat. But I'll put a link to it in the description. It's really funny. But it's really true, right? Because if you actually spoke Japanese flat, you would sound awful. You would sound like a robot. It would literally be like, "はい,そうですね。僕は日本語を話すのが得意じゃないんですけど、はい、そうですね," or whatever. And that doesn't sound good at all. And then the thing about having wrong or inconsistent pitch accent, like if you watch me in my Jiko Shokai video on my channel from 2 years ago, before I studied pitch accent at all, I mess up pitch accent a lot in that video, but I sound way better than someone who would be speaking in a robot flat voice, right? Because the thing is that even like even if you take the advice to mean, oh, well, you're not literally speaking flat, you're just saying every word as Heiban, then that's still going to be probably more weird, because if you just do nothing but immersion and you never study pitch accent or anything, then you're going to probably still have more than 50% of the pitch accents correct, because your brain picks up some stuff, right? Like phrases that you hear all the time, like yoroshiku onegaishimasu, or like ohayo, arigato. It's like things like that you're still going to get right. And there's a lot of things that your brain will pick up naturally. And so you're going to end up with more than 50% accuracy. Like you'll probably end up with like 60% accuracy of pitch accent, even if you never study. But if you try to override that and just purposely say everything flat, then you'll probably end up with like 40% accuracy overall. So it'll probably be worse. And plus also, like, so much of the language is through intonation, you know, and it's an intuitive thing that you can pick up, that you can pick up. Like if the difference between saying like ine versus like oh, hold on, wait, that was not a good example. Like let me see. Like iyo versus iyo, right? Those have totally opposite meanings, right? Or just things like it's hard to think of an example like on the spot. But so much of spoken language is intonation, and you can't just like override that and try to make it all flat. It won't. It's completely unrealistic. Basically, if you get a lot of immersion and you never study pitch accent, you'll still sound really good. Like I still sound pretty good, especially compared to most gaijin in my Jiko Shokai video, even though I never studied pitch accent and I get a lot of pitch accent wrong. And if I basically bottom line, if I purposely said everything flat, I would have sounded way worse than I sounded in that video. It would sound really weird and unnatural. That advice only applies to someone who sounds god-awful and they're trying to just curve the god-awfulness of their speech. So Peter Pham asks, how would you go about learning to program, since you mentioned you would do it if you didn't happen to pick Japanese? In other words, how would you translate MIA into learning programming? I've been programming for a while and would like to hear your opinion on how to study it. Well, I mean, I can't really talk about this because I don't know how to program. So I can't really talk about how I would learn something that I don't know anything about at all, because this is like a theory versus practice thing, right? Just because I learned Japanese doesn't mean I know how to learn how to program, right? Because I don't know how similar programming is to human language. In my opinion, human language, as far as I can tell, like language acquisition, is significantly different than most other skills, because it's the only skill that you can learn through input alone. Other skills, like you can't learn how to ride a bike through watching videos of people ride a bike all day, right? You have to actually go and get on the bike and fall. But you can actually learn to speak language just through watching videos of other people speak the language. And so I think that language is sort of an instinct. It's something that the human brain is built to do. It's and other skills that we go on to acquire in life, like learning how to ride a bike or how to throw a ball into a hoop, those are not our instincts. Those are something that we have to train ourselves to become able to do more actively. And so I don't know the extent to which like MIA, which is a language learning philosophy and a language learning approach, could be directly applied to other skills. Now, you know, programming languages are called programming languages, so it could be that they have a lot of things in common with learning a human language. But I've never learned a programming language, so I don't really know. And I don't feel comfortable like just speculating on it, because it'd be total speculation. It could be totally wrong. And one of my closest friends, Yoga Pants, he is a programmer, and he's gotten to a high level of programming of programming ability in a relatively short period of time. And he did that after reaching fluency in 3 languages. And he says that if he could go back in time, he would have approached programming much differently than he did, and he thinks that he could have made the same progress in a much shorter period of time. And so that kind of tells me that just because you know how to learn a language, that doesn't automatically mean that you know the efficient way to learn how to program. Now, what Yoga Pants has told me about learning how to program is that some of the things that are true about language learning that are also true about learning how to program is input over output, that just read, like, and also kind of like immersing in native material from the beginning. He said that, like, what he would do if he could go back is just read a few beginner books to learn, like, the very most fundamental things, and then just go and start reading the actual code of actual products, of actual open source projects and things like that, and figure out what's going on, and then have an input to output ratio of like 9 to 10. And you because it's like through understanding what's going on in other programming, you're teaching your brain like how things tend to be done and how things tend to work. And then when you want to make something, you've seen these patterns so many times, your brain knows what to do, and you learn to be able to kind of think and code that way. But I can't really say anything more than that, because I haven't done it. And one of my most core philosophies is practice over theory. Like, only take advice from someone who has succeeded in the thing that you want to succeed in, right? Katsumoto had some quote where he's like, if you want to go to planet X, only listen to the advice of people who've been to planet X. And the opinion of everyone else who hasn't been to planet X doesn't matter at all. And I think that's really true. So I would go and try to hit up Yoga Pants if you wanted to hear more about this type of language learning philosophy in the context of code. But I can't really tell you that because I don't know how to code. So Alex Rogers asks, when talking about your experience with psychedelics, you talked about how Japanese people are conformist and go with the flow even when it clearly causes damage. I don't like this aspect of Japanese culture myself, but I was wondering, in your experience, have you ever seen Japanese people doing the opposite? That is, not going with the flow, opposing the mainstream culture, trying to change things, or living their life differently than everyone else around them. Well, you have to remember that I haven't lived in Japan since I was 17 years old, and I haven't lived in Japan while being fluent in Japanese ever. So I don't really... I can't really answer this question from direct experience. Like, I've met a lot of Japanese people, like, over here in the US that are definitely outside of the norm. But I mean, like, if you decide to go to leave Japan and go and live in another country, that already kind of sets you apart from the norm of Japanese culture. And so I feel like it's kind of different than seeing them within their own culture. But I mean, I've met a lot of Japanese people who like don't like Japanese culture, and they don't resonate with it at all. And they do their own thing. And I mean, overall, like, Japanese people are all individuals, right? They're all different. So although the overall tendency is to go with the flow, there's always people who don't, and there's always the mainstream culture in Japan isn't one thing. There's lots of different things, and there is a section of mainstream Japanese culture where people do try to pursue having finding out the truth separate from what is common knowledge or common sense, and try to live more efficient, like, better lives by either changing their diet to a specific type of diet, or like picking up different going out of the way to study lots of different philosophies and books written by authors from all around the world and stuff like that. But then there's another section of Japanese culture that's mainstream that makes fun of those people and calls them意識高い系. And from their point of view, a lot of those people are kind of really egotistical, and they feel like they know better than everyone else, and they kind of just look down. Like, those people who do all those things, they look down on everyone else for not being as advanced as them, or for realizing that if you want to have the best life, you need to go and find it and like look for it yourself. And so they get kind of looked down on by another portion of society. And also, like, if you look at like the Geinokai in Japan, like all the people who show up on Japanese TV, a lot of them like completely don't fit the mold of the mainstream culture, right? Like if you look at Matsuko Deluxe, like I think officially it's still a he. It's this guy, but he like is obese and he always cross dresses and he talks like a girl. And he kind of like dresses like a girl and talks like a girl, and you know he's a comedian, I guess. And Japanese people love him, right? Like, now if you're like were that type of Japanese person and you know were just trying to live a normal life and have a normal job or like go to school, then most people would look at you really weird and not want to talk to you and not be associated with you. But because he's a celebrity, it's like those normal social rules don't apply at all, and he's totally weird. I mean, and everyone just loves him, and no one like puts the normal Japanese standards onto him because he's a celebrity. And there's lots of times like also there's a lot of like if you Ariyoshi, if you look at him, he's like super dokuzatsu, which means he will make fun of people super hard, and he will say the thing that normally would be taboo to say because it's just kind of taboo to like insult people and say fucked up shit like right in front of people's face, but he just does that all the time because he's a comedian and that's his style of humor, and it's super funny when he does that. He always gives people like super mean nicknames and stuff, and it's totally okay because it's the TV, you know, it's the TV show, it's not real life. But if you were going to do what Ariyoshi does in real life, then you would have no friends and everyone would avoid you as much as possible because you would be like kuki yomenai, and you would just be an outcast that doesn't understand the unwritten rules of society. But it's interesting to look at the Geinokai and realize that these are people that are loved by so much of Japan and are like almost worshipped by a lot of the portion of Japan, yet they don't follow the social norms at all. And I think part of that is because deep down Japanese people do kind of feel a lot of pressure from these social norms and do feel like they're kind of suppressing part of themselves. And so then they look at these, when they turn on the TV, they like seeing what they wish that they could do, you know? It's almost like their outlet, seeing like, oh yeah, Ariyoshi, when he's like making fun of all these people for their clothes or their hair or their teeth or the way they talk or whatever, like, that is like a release for them because that's like what they're really thinking like all day and what they wish they could say. Also downtown as well, like if you watch Japanese TV, you still see the guys from downtown. Like downtown is this comedy duo, Matsumoto Hitoshi and Hamada Toshi nandakke, Toshi something, I don't remember his last name, everyone just calls him Hamada, but he they're, you know, they basically kind of totally revolutionized Japanese comedy in the early 80s and throughout the 90s as well. And so now they're already really old and they're like in their 60s, I think, 50 or 60s, but they're still on TV. Like if you know the TV show Suiyobi no Downtown, or like I think Gaki no Tsukai is still on TV, and you know, Subera na Hanashi and stuff. It's like they're still on TV because they were like the king of the Japanese celebrity world. They were the kings of the Japanese celebrity world for so long that even though now they're kind of old and they like kind of don't have the same edge that they used to have, they still like have their position within the kind of television world. But the other day I was watching some of their old shows from the 90s. Like they used to have the show called Hey Hey Hey, where they would interview musicians, and it's super funny because the musicians, you know, they're not necessarily good at talking or being funny or being in front of a camera in front of a crowd, you know, they're just musicians. And so a lot of times they're sitting up there like in front of the camera and they're all awkward and kind of quiet, and the two downtown guys, it's like they'll get them to speak, but they'll always be picking fun at them at the same time. And even some, like if you know Gakuto, like normally he's a super cool, like badass guy who is normally the one who's always dominating the scene. But I was watching a few of these old videos of like downtown, like totally kind of picking him apart and destroying him. And like Gakuto couldn't like he couldn't maintain his normal frame because Matsumoto Itoshi back then was so sharp and he's so funny. Like it is so like it made me understand like why Downtown is considered to be so legendary now is because he was so funny. Like he would pull out these like narrative, like whatever would just happen to be going on. Like he'd just take these like one or two random things that the person said, and like before, without even you realizing it, he'll like build it up into this whole narrative that's really funny. And he'll like have all these comebacks that are so fast and all these super funny comments. And when you realize like, oh shit, this isn't even planned. He's literally just coming up with this on the spot. You realize that he was a genius. And now he's old, and so he just like kind of like doesn't have it anymore because it's like he's like in his 60s, so it's understandable. But that too, right? It's like he would just make fun of people so hard, right to their face. Like there was just things like when it was like a live, they had a live audience when they were doing it. He'd make fun of people in the crowd too, and it'd be so funny. But you could never do that in real life, right? That was mostly just a tangent, but so I mean, I feel like, yeah, I can't really give the answer to your question that I think you're looking for because I haven't lived in Japan, right? It's not like I live in Japan and I was like, oh yeah, just yesterday on the train, there was this guy who stood up for an old lady or whatever. But, I mean, there are a lot of, like Japanese mainstream culture isn't one thing. There's a lot of different currents within it that are changing. And there is a part of the mainstream, like it's already partially mainstream to think that the mainstream stuff is bullshit. And it's really not a binary, right? It's not like you're either completely in the stream or you're completely outside of it, either. So, I mean, I know there are a lot of like if you go just on the internet, research on YouTube, it's like there's whatever niche hobby you can think of. There are Japanese people who have that niche hobby or have that opinion or that philosophy or anything. So, I mean, I don't really know what you're looking for, but maybe you got something out of my random rambling. Yeah. So TJ Bergquist asks, I've spent a lot of time with languages and used to use Rosetta Stone. Ultimately, I think the program sucks, especially for Japanese. This said, one strength that I haven't seen reflected elsewhere is its association with pictures to words. Or with words to pictures. Naturally, many concepts will fail to be adequately associated with a simple image. That said, have you encountered any Japanese picture dictionaries of any merit, and do you think there is any merit in using one? My hunch is avoiding English and going straight to mental ease. My hunch is in avoiding English and going straight to mental ease that it may make it quicker to get an intuitive feel for the language. Well, first of all, I definitely think that pictures can be very useful. I do think there's other times where trying to avoid English, like the plague, will actually just slow down your progress, because you can use your English understanding as a tool if you do it correctly. But yeah, I know of this really great Japanese picture dictionary. I used it all the time. I still use it pretty often. It's called Google Images. You can search a word in Google Images and then instantly get hundreds of pictures that are associated to whatever you searched, and it will give you a really good idea of what Japanese people think of when they think of that word, or what comes to mind when they think of that word, or like what that word tends to be associated with. Like if you search kawaii and kanji in Google Images, you get something very different than if you search kawaii in Romaji, right? Because what is kawaii to Japanese people is very different than what kawaii means in the English weeaboo sphere. And so like I've always used, like whenever I look something up in the like some things just don't like literally lend themselves to a picture at all in the first place, right? Like if you're talking about like, let's see, I mean, a lot of verbs, right? Like, I mean, I guess so. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it could be more, but pretty sure like you could search suwaru in the Japanese dictionary. You'd probably get pictures of people sitting, right? You could probably search samui and then see pictures of like snow and stuff. I'm actually kind of curious what would come up if you search that. But I mean, I don't know, like, how could there be a better picture dictionary than Google Images, right? Like, yeah, okay, this is what you see when you search samui. It's like that'd be pretty good. So yeah, if you want to like use Google Images, I mean, I think the thing is that the way that Mentalese works is that it's not like if you see the English definition for something one time, then you forever made a permanent association or anything, right? It's like you can what you can do is you could look up samui in the English dictionary and see that it means cold, and then in your mind you could kind of come up with an image of what cold looks like whether it's a girl going like this or whatever. And then when you're trying to remember what does samui mean, you can remember the picture, right? So this is kind of what I would do is there's like I think it would be better to go to the English dictionary, get what it actually means, like approximately, and then come up with your own mental representation of it that you can access instead of the English, rather than to just Google it and see, and then try to guess like, okay, so I guess it means something like cold because there's all these pictures. Maybe it means snowy though, because there's a lot of stuff with snow. It's like that way you'll just be more kind of confused. And so I think like once you get comfortable with mentalese, like I definitely find that you can just because you technically know what it would mean in English, that doesn't mean that you have to recall the English every time. And I mean, trying to like, even if you never looked it up in the English dictionary, when you search samui in Google Images and you're seeing all these pictures, you're still going to be thinking, oh, so it means cold, right? It's like you're still going to have that thought, and it's kind of, I think, meaningless and futile to futile? I don't think that's the word. Futile. Sorry, I think it's futile to try to just like completely not have English be a part of your internal dialogue at all whenever you're doing stuff related to Japanese. Like, yeah, so I would say overall, like, if you want some inspiration for a more mental image of what something means, definitely go to Google Images, especially for nouns. Like, this is actually, I feel like, more useful after you make the monolingual transition, because then you actually have, some distance from English, right? So if you look up a word in the dictionary and you can kind of tell that it's a noun in the dictionary and the definition is super long, and you feel like, oh, like it's a type of animal, right? Or it's a type of bird or something, right? It's like you don't need to know the English meaning of it, because that's probably not even going to help you, because you probably really don't know different types of birds in English anyway. But you could just Google image it and then just remember, like, okay, it's a bird that looks like this, you know? And so I think Google Images is a great tool that I've always used, and I'll oftentimes put pictures on cards to kind of help me associate the word with a mental image and a meaning in mentalese. But you can still look it up in English first, and that will actually make the process of understanding it through mentalese more quick, because then you won't have to be playing this kind of charades guessing game. So TJ also asks, currently I am consistently putting in 3 to 4 hours of active listening per day, reading an hour and doing SRS an hour or so. If I continue at this rate, roughly what kind of development should I see in a year? Ah, dude, you didn't write what level you're at now. Come on. How am I supposed to say, like, where you'll be in a year if I don't know where you are now? Additionally, I'm interested in speaking at a near native level. What kind of ratio between these components would you recommend? So, if you're getting 3 to 4 hours of high quality active listening immersion and reading for an hour a day and doing an hour of SRSing, I mean, I don't know where you are now, so how am I supposed to answer that? But, I mean, because, like, for me, if I did that for a year, I wouldn't make that much progress, because I'm already so fluent. But if you were a complete noob and you did that, then you could reach probably a pretty high level and get to, you could probably get to go from nothing to stage 3. So I'd say that, assuming that you're in stage 1 now, you can probably finish stage 1, finish all of stage 3, and get partially through stage 3. I I think that's probably a pretty good ratio, reading for an hour and doing SRS for an hour, and then doing it all as much listening as you can outside of that. That's probably what that's probably pretty good. I was gonna say that's what I would do, but if what I would do is probably like not read at all for the first year. But I know that's like pretty intense, and not for most people. But I'd say you're on a pretty that sounds like a pretty good schedule, and if you maintain that, you should see a lot of progress in a year, assuming that you're not already at a super high level. So Kyle asks, if you're taking the perfectionist approach, would you recommend avoiding monolingual transition early on? I'm at 2,500 bilingual audio-based sentence cards and would like to know if I should start the monolingual transition. Well, what I think you should do is, if you're taking the perfectionist approach, you should follow the perfectionist outline that I made. I made, if you go onto the MIA timeline, the MIA website, and then you go to stage 0, and you click on the Perfectionist Path overview, I have exactly what you should do at what period of your learning. And this might sound strange, but I recommend you do what I wrote there, and I actually wrote that there because doing what I wrote there is what I recommend. So, there is that. So, Thomas Donovan asks, what are your thoughts on using Yomichan as a standalone dictionary instead of Kolbri? You may already know, but if you press Alt-Insert or click the magnifying glass after clicking on the Yomichan icon, you can use it as its own standalone dictionary or for whatever dictionary files you've added, similar to Kolbri. It currently supports blah, 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 blah. So there's a few downsides I could think of using Yomichan as a standalone dictionary, and there's not really any benefits that I can think of. So some downsides are that you can't have multiple tabs, whereas if you're in Kolibri, you can have multiple tabs. And so if there's a word in a definition that you don't know, you can highlight it, instantly look it up, it will pop up in a second tab, and then you can close that tab and instantly go back to the first one. You can open as many tabs as you want, and that's very useful. There's audio on the NHK Accent Dictionary, whereas there is some audio on Kolibri, but it's not the audio for the NHK Accent Dictionary, and there's a lot of words it doesn't have audio for that the NHK Accent Dictionary does have audio for. And there's also and also, just so you know, you didn't write it here, but Yoga Pants made Yomichan dictionaries for Shin Meikai and the NHK Accent Dictionary that you can get if you go to his channel. And so it does have pretty much all the main dictionaries that you would want. But also the other thing is that there's no limited searching, whereas in Kolibri you can say, only show me words that match this exactly, or show me words that start with this, or show me words that end with this. And I use all three of these different ways of searching quite regularly, and you wouldn't be able to do that with Kolibri. But overall, I mean, you could use it as Kolibri as your dictionary. But I mean, if you're on your computer anyway, I don't really see what the benefit of doing that would be. And then there's all the downsides that I listed above. And Simone asks, how is your meditation going? Have you seen some results recently? What stage do you think you're at? I'd like to hear from you more personal experiences and goals you might have achieved. So, I mean, this is like a really personal question, because once you kind of really dive deep into meditation, you end up confronting a lot of kind of personal emotional issues that you've had. And before you can really reach the highest stages, you kind of have to go through and deal with, or what should I say, like work through all the kind of emotional baggage that you've built up throughout your life. And everyone has a certain amount of emotional baggage they built up through their life, some more than others. Luckily, there's a lot of people, luckily I have it pretty good off compared to some other people who've had a lot of really, really tough experiences. But it gets a lot more messy than what you might think just reading kind of the Mind Illuminated. Because when you read the Mind Illuminated, it makes it kind of seem like, oh, it's like getting good at some other skill, right? Where it's like, oh, I can get good at Japanese from immersing 5 hours a day. So I'm going to get good at meditation from meditating 2 hours a day or whatever, right? But when you're meditating and you're going really deep into your own mind, then it's like after a certain point, you can't compartmentalize training your mind from dealing with all of your own emotional issues and all the kind of emotional stuff that you've just like shoved down and ignored and not processed throughout your life, which, I mean, most people, including myself, the way that, you know, you've had a lot of different, if you're a normal person like I am, then throughout the course of your life, if you've lived longer than 10 years, you've had a lot of experiences that were very powerful to you subjectively, both positive and negative. But a lot of the negative ones you didn't like truly process. You kind of just like shoved into the corner of your mind and pretended that didn't happen, but they're still there, kind of like affecting your behavior in unconscious ways, or like affecting your preferences, or and things like that. And so when you just kind of sit down and you really calm your mind and you give your mind some space, all that stuff starts to kind of bubble up to the surface, because your mind wants to deal with that stuff, because it's like you're like, you know, it's like almost as if you have this cut and there's like a scab over the cut, and you've just been constantly like ripping off the scab before it healed and then growing a new scab and then ripping it off. It's like your body wants to heal the cut. It just never had the opportunity to. And so once you give it the opportunity, it's going to like start working through that stuff. And it's really emotionally challenging. Some of the most emotionally challenging stuff. And that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to maintain a meditation practice, is because you're kind of just sitting there and just staring all your own demons in the face. And your mind's reaction to that is, I don't want to do this. This sucks. Let's go do something else. And it takes a while of meditating before you really realize that the reason why you hate meditating so much and why you avoid it so much is because like your mind is trying to get you to avoid looking at all of that stuff. But if you stick with it and you really work through it, then you can let go of a lot of that emotional baggage, and when you do, it'll make you feel a lot better, and it'll be a lot easier to be the type of person who you want to be after that, and you'll feel a more lighthearted. And it'll be a lot easier to actually make progress, the kind of progress that they talk about in the Mind Illuminated. And so, I mean, it would be kind of weird for me to talk about like the specific stuff that I have like dealt with through meditation here. But I have worked through a lot of different stuff, and it really has completely changed my perspective on things, because, I mean, first of all, my like moment to moment level of concentration and mindfulness is uncomparably higher than it was before I started meditating, and seems to be uncomparable, like much higher than most people who I see day to day. And I benefit from this every single day. You know, like I'm much more aware of my emotions and my reactions to things, and so it's a lot easier to change my behavior, and I effectively have a lot more willpower in things, and it's easier to concentrate, which just makes everything go better and feel better. And especially like with things with language learning, like everything that I said in my initial meditation video about the benefits to language learning, those all have proved to be very true in my experience, especially when like you're doing something very, very challenging, like things like shadowing, or things like listening to a new domain of language where you understand very little and it's hard to concentrate. It helps immensely, especially on things where you get discouraged because you're going through a plateau. It's much easier to not take that stuff seriously and just realize that it's just a normal phase and not have it affect you emotionally. But I definitely like I can look around and see that there's a lot of people who are not very emotionally mature, and I'm not emotionally mature either. But I'm becoming aware of my own emotional immaturity, and realizing that if I keep meditating and keep doing the practices that I've been doing, then, you know, within the next 5 to 10 years, I will hopefully grow into an emotionally mature person. And I look around and see that most people that are around my proximity in my life are not very emotionally mature, and because emotional maturity isn't really something that comes from just living your life. It's something that you have to cultivate, just like physical strength, right? Like if you just live your life on the computer all day, you don't grow muscles and you don't become physically fit. It's kind of a similar thing where dealing with emotional issues is very challenging. It's, for me, like, seems like it's pretty much the only thing that truly is hard is putting up with emotional resistance. And that emotional resistance can show itself in other ways. But that's what, really, when you say something's difficult, what you mean is it requires a lot of emotional resistance, right? Because, like, for me, learning a language isn't difficult because I love doing all the activities that is required to learn a language. So although for someone else it might be difficult because, like, it takes willpower for them to immerse for many hours each day and to not do things that are in their native language and things like that. When I was doing Japanese, it didn't require any immersion or any willpower to do that because my mind thought that was the thing that was going to help me the most. And so it was totally effortless. But things that, like, you know, for going to school for me right now, because I really don't like going to school, I have a lot of emotional resistance to that. I don't like doing my homework and, like, studying for tests. Like, I always feel like I would rather do anything else in the world but that stuff. And that's because I have emotional resistance to it. I feel like I want to not do it, but I have to do it anyway. So that's really what difficult means, is putting up with emotional resistance, pushing through that. And that's what willpower is pushing through emotional resistance, like the ability to do that. And it takes a lot of pushing through emotional resistance in order to become emotionally mature, right? Like, when someone, like, for me, I notice all the time my mind has irrational reactions to things. Like, if someone writes a YouTube comment that I don't like, then I might get angry or feel like, oh, this person is so stupid, I have to, like, make them recognize how amazing I am and stuff. But I can see that that's illogical, and that it comes from an emotional immaturity and a sort of insecurity. And so I can be mindful of that and then not act on it and let it go. But that's very challenging emotionally. And I see that it takes a lot of doing that over and over and over again every day, becoming more and more aware of your own mind, and then not acting on old conditioned patterns that are not skillful in order to become emotionally mature. But most people don't do that because they don't meditate, so they don't even get to the point where they realize how emotionally mature they are. Whereas, like, for me, I'm on, like, the bottom of the Dunning-Kruger curve where I feel like I'm not mature at all and I totally suck at being a human. But that's okay because everyone else around me also sucks at being a human, and at least I'm aware of it, and I'm, like, taking steps to change that in the future. So, like, especially now, like, I actually have some real life meditation friends, and some of them are much farther down the path than me. Like, they've been doing it for a lot longer and they're a lot further, and I can tell, like, when you talk to them, like, it's just like, for me, like, when I talk to someone who's been learning Japanese for a while but they're not really fluent yet, like, I can tell that they don't see what I see. You know, like, after 2 minutes of talking to them, I can tell whether they get it or not, or whether they really don't understand how this language learning thing works and they haven't gotten anywhere. It's effortless for me to see. And talking to some of my new friends, I can tell that I am like that from their point of view. Like, I'm still at the bottom of the Dunning-Kruger curve, and I don't, like, haven't mastered any of this stuff yet. I'm still just beginning. I'm still basically a noob, and I can tell that they can tell, and I can't fake it. You know, I get that sense, and so that's why I'm really reluctant to talk that much about meditation, like, on here, because that'd be like someone who's not fluent in Japanese yet talking about how to learn Japanese. Whereas I do kind of know that meditation is really important and beneficial. I've already, like I said, benefited so much from it, and I feel so grateful that I actually understand meditation and, like, am actually doing this practice. Otherwise, I would end up being like, probably emotionally immature, just like everyone around me, for the rest of my life, and that leading to me causing lots of harm to myself and others. But yeah, at the same time, it's such a personal thing, and and I'm not, like, the master of it yet. And I actually was thinking the other day, like, if I could go back in time, I don't know if I would still recommend meditation, like, publicly, because although, I mean, I would obviously recommend meditation to anyone who I really cared about, and I do think it will help with language learning. Like I said before, like, when you get deep into it, it's so much more than just a workout for your mind, right? It's like, meditation means becoming more aware, and when you become more aware of yourself, then you realize that there's a lot you need to change, and that goes way beyond just language learning, and that takes you down a whole different road. And so since my domain is really just language learning and helping people learn a language, I feel like it's not really fair to or not really fair, but maybe not really appropriate to recommend meditation. Just like it's not really, just like how I didn't put like start a exercise program on the timeline, right? Because that's not really fit for everyone, you know? Like not like, although overall exercising is going to probably help you learn Japanese better, because, you know, you're going to be less stressed and have a clear mind and sleep better and like all the other benefits of exercise. I didn't really put on the timeline because that's more just like a common sense thing. And, you know, not everyone can exercise, you know, like maybe if you're sick or you have some other condition, you can't. That doesn't mean you can't learn Japanese. And I don't want it to feel like people, like it just felt so separate, right? Even though it's obviously connected, because everything in your life is connected. It felt pretty separate. And I'm realizing that meditation is probably more in that category. And so probably, yeah. And I mean, there's just a lot of people who aren't really mature enough yet to really understand the value of meditation. And I know that's why a lot of people like kind of make fun of me for talking about it, because they're not really mature enough to really understand what it is or why it's important. And that's totally cool. But I'm kind of realizing that probably it's not really, probably doesn't really fit in very neatly with the rest of stuff in MIA. But I've still, haven't totally made up my mind about that. So, Sevi asks, I've seen a lot of normie JP learners complain about how hard it is to understand Kansai-ben. Even written Kansai-ben. Is it typical for people following the AJAT/MIA method to struggle understanding that or other dialects? Do you struggle with it yourself? So if you're actually doing MIA or AJAT, then Kansai-ben is going to be no problem for you at all. That's like, if someone's complaining about Kansai-ben, that's a real sign that they do not really know what they're doing with language learning, because like Kansai-ben is not very different from like Tokyo-ben or like Hyojungo. From like a big picture perspective, like if we were going to say that English and Japanese are like 50 units apart, right? Like let's say that English and Spanish are like 15 units apart, and Japanese and English are 50 units apart. Kansai-ben and Hyojungo would be like 2 units apart. They're like almost exactly the same. They're really only different on the surface. Like what all the difference is, they have a 1-to-1 correlation. Like you instead of saying nai on the end of verbs, you say hen, right? So like wakara nai, wakara hen, right? So that's so easy to learn. You can learn that in 10 seconds. I just taught it to you. Nai becomes hen. And then there's a bunch of other things, like instead of saying like takaku naru, it's like takanaru. They say that. So like on E adjectives, you take off the E and add naru, instead of taking off the E, putting a ku and then adding naru. And there's like probably like 20 little changes like this. And then you know like 90% of Kansai-ben already. And then of course the pitch accent is different. But I mean, if you are a native English speaker or like don't speak a language with tones or pitch accent, then your brain probably doesn't even use pitch accent to determine the meaning of words anyway. So it's actually it's like when you hear the word umi, right? Your brain probably doesn't even listen for whether it was umi or umi. It probably just knows that the u sound and then the mi sound means ocean. And so even though that it will have a different pitch accent in Kansai-ben, your brain is still going to be able to tell that it means ocean. And so like I remember I was shocked at how like not different Kansai-ben was. And you can, if you have a decent understanding of Hyojungo, you can get to the point where you can understand Kansai-ben in like a week. Like if you just immerse in Kansai-ben material for a week, then you'll have it pretty much figured out and you'll be good. So yeah, it's kind of amusing to me that people think that Kansai-ben would be hard. I mean, and I just mean being able to understand it, right? Being able to speak it is a different thing. That's going to be more challenging, obviously. But for me, like, I never even said, okay, I'm going to study Kansai-ben. Just Kansai-ben would come up in my normal immersion enough that I could figure it out just through that, right? Like either there's one character in an anime that speaks it, or there's one person on a TV show that speaks it. Like if you watch Japanese TV, Kansai-ben just comes up enough naturally that you can learn it bit by bit as it comes up, and then you'll end up knowing it all pretty soon. So, and for me, it was just something I ended up learning naturally through my normal immersion, and I never thought of it as challenging. And this goes for every dialect. Like any dialect that normal Japanese people can understand, you can learn to understand in a week. Like there's some dialects that are so different that it literally is like more like English and Spanish, like Aomori-ben or Kagoshima-ben. It's like it doesn't even sound like Japanese when you listen to it. But Japanese people can't understand that at all either. So it doesn't really matter. Like things like Hiroshima-ben or like the Tohoku dialects or Kyushu dialects, like they're all super easy to learn because they're hardly different at all. And there's some little differences that are actually not one-to-one. Like if you like in Hyojungo, if you said like yatteru, that could mean that either you are in the process of doing it right now, or you've already done it and the result of having done it is still remaining. But for those two different usages, like, or for example, if you said like itteru, that could mean that you're going right now, or you're already there and then you got there and you're still there because you went and then the action of going was completed and then the result is still there. But there's actually two different structures for that in some dialects of Japanese, where it would be like it would either be like like ikiyoru or I can't even remember. It's different depending on the dialect. I know Hiroshima-ben has it, and Kansai-ben has it as well. If I understood it, I would understand which one was which. But so there's some stuff like that. But again, you can just Google it, and then there'll be like a Chiebukuro post that like explains it. And so yeah, not hard at all, in my opinion. Alex Ashby asks, I have just started the monolingual transition, but I have a hard time parsing the symbols and structure used in monolingual Japanese dictionaries. It would be great to get a guided walkthrough of a couple entries in your favorite dictionaries, where you break down what each section means. What is inside each different set of brackets? What do the different symbols mean? What is important for sentence mining? Everything, what can be safely ignored? So I do plan on making a video about this in the future because obviously it's very important, very good question. And when I think back to it, this is something that I just had to figure out myself, and it took a lot of time. And there were some things that I like didn't know for a very long time. And I think it would have been really useful if I did just have someone explain it to me. So I definitely am going to do that. But it's hard for me to just do right here because every dictionary is a little different. And all the symbols mean different things in each of the dictionaries. They all have their own like internal code. So I would have to do it on a dictionary by dictionary basis. But I'll go through some right now on Shinmeikai. And then I'll also just show you another cool trick about Kolbri. So here, I'll switch to my desktop. So first of all, if you have Kolbri, I'm assuming you do. I don't know how to do this in any other program but Kolbri. But so like, you know, here's the normal mode. You can type stuff here and then it'll search it for you. But if you click on this magnifying glass right here and you turn it into a book, and then you click here and you choose a dictionary, and then you click search, it will show you like the equivalent of the back of the book. So like, for example, if we go to the NHK Accent Dictionary, hopefully I can find it. My thing's like messed up and I have a bunch of repeats on this list. So, here. Then it gives you some extra information about conjugations and stuff. Now, this is nothing like the back of the book of the physical version. It has much less information. I will say that. But there's still some cool, useful stuff in here. And then for most of the other dictionaries, it explains the notation. So like if we went to the Shinmeikai one, and then we scroll down to the bottom and we click this thing, hande, like this, the hande, this basically means like it's the legend. It's like it explains what all the symbols mean and everything. And then this page, it explains what all the symbols mean. So it's like, okay, the ones that are in these symbols are Joyo kanji. And like here, it explains what a triangle means. And it says, okay, if there's a triangle, that means that it can be what comes after the triangle or what comes after the parentheses after that. And so if there's ever a specific dictionary where there's a symbol or something that you want to know the meaning of, but you can't figure it out intuitively, then you can use this trick and you should be able to find it on this page, on the Hande. But yeah, so I'll go through some definitions now. I think one of whoever asked the question, they listed a few example words of ones that they would want me to go over. So okay, so I'm just gonna go over Shinmeikai because, like I said, it's a little bit different in each accent dictionary. So in Shinmeikai, so first of all, we have, okay, here's the pronunciation and kana. Here is the kanji. And then these two dots right here mean that it's very common. If there's one dot, that means it's pretty common. The thing about with the pitch accent is that this version of Shinmeikai has a really stupid way of giving pitch accent notation, and it doesn't really make any sense in my opinion. Like, basically, the things before the colon mean the accents of it when it's in Rentaike, and this one is the accent when it's in Shushike. But really, just ignore the first one and only do the second one, because like what it's saying is that it can be 0 or 3, right? And so if it's 3 syllables, that means it can be odaka or heiban. But the only reason it's saying it can be odaka is because there's certain particles that always attach low regardless of the verb. And so like if you said like makeru to itta, then that to, the makeru to, that to would drop low, but that's not because makeru is odaka. That's because the to always drops low. And so if you look at the newer version of Shinmeikai, if you look at Shinmeikai 7, because this is version 5, they don't do this anymore. They just show this one, because this is what it is when it's just ending a word. And so ignore the one before the parentheses and only worry about the last one. This is only going to be for verbs. So here we see that it has two different definitions fundamentally, definition 1 and definition 2. And when I mean they're like fundamentally different, meaning it's like a different part of, it's a different conjugation or different part of speech. So what we see here is that it's a jidoshi, which means it's a intransitive verb, I think. Wow, this is my English here. So jidoshi means it doesn't take a direct object, which means it would be intransitive, yeah. And then it means it's a shimo ichidan conjugation. So if you want to know about how Japanese people talk about Japanese grammar, watch my intro to classical Japanese grammar video I released last week. And then in the second one, it's a tadoshi, which means a transitive verb, and then it's also the same conjugation, shimo ichidan. But you don't really need to worry about the conjugations for now, or whether it's intransitive or intransitive. You don't really have to worry about that at all. That's just if you're curious. And so then we have two different definitions for the first meaning, and then one for the second meaning. And then over here, hyoki, so this just means how it can be written. So it's saying for definition for like 1A, because it's like 1A, when you're talking about a shobu, it can also be written like this. And I think this symbol right here means that it's not an official like Joyo kanji reading. I'm not totally sure, because there's like there's not only official list of Joyo kanji, but there's also a list of the official readings of the Joyo kanji. And it could be that this is a Joyo kanji, but this reading of the Joyo kanji isn't Joyo, isn't like on the official list. But again, you don't really have to worry about this that much. So then it says, dare nani ni. So this is kind of like the way that it's used. So it means like, dare ni makeru. Nani ni makeru. So it's just saying, okay, so normally you use this verb with the particle ni, and you're either putting what you lost to or who you lost to. It's just kind of giving you a hint of the broad way that it's used in this meaning. So it says, 相手に圧倒されて自分の優位が保てなくなる. So you get overwhelmed by your opponent, and you cease to be able to maintain your superior position, you could say. And it means to lose, so I guess that makes sense. Then we have example sentences. So 戦争に負ける, 圧力に負ける. So this triangle right here, it means that that the thing that comes after the the triangle can be swapped out with the thing in the parentheses. So it means it can be sensou ni makeru or atsuryoku ni makeru, either one. And it means it's like a similar usage. Then soshou ni makeru, to lose a case, what's it called? Not the English, like a court case. Yuaku ni makeru. And then see, some of them, if it's like a special usage that might not be intuitive, they have an extra explanation. So like yuaku ni makeru, then it says yuak. What that basically means is to give into a temptation, to lose to a temptation. And then it has extra meaning. It says teikou suru chikara o ushinau. So to lose the ability to resist against. So you lose the ability to lose to a temptation means you lose the ability to resist against it. Wanruku de wa kari ni makenai. So this, then it says like, okay, in this usage it means to not be inferior. So this sentence, wanruku de wa kari ni makenai, which would mean like, I don't lose to him when it comes to physical strength, meaning I'm not physically weaker than him, meaning I'm at least as physically as strong as he is. So then it tells you that it's not literally lose a battle, it's lose like I'm not inferior. And so then you see there's more and more examples of like the specific ways it can be used, and then if it's a kind of a way that's not entirely intuitive, then it has an extra explanation. Then over here we have a second meaning. It says you can only use it with something, not someone. Then so again, here's the triangle. It just means that it can be either taiki or shintai, either one. But I guess the one that comes first is like the more main one. So, 大気を支配する異常によって体力、気力が失われる。So, this is hard to translate. So, due to a due to an abnormality that is exerting influence on the atmosphere, you lose your physical or mental strength. And so here's the example sentence, like atsusa ni makeru or byoki ni makeru. So it kind of just means that you are getting owned or you're getting pwned by some sort of abnormality is what it's putting it. So it's saying like, so if you said atsusa ni makeru, to lose to the heat, it kind of just means like to like, you know, be really struggling with the heat, to like really be having the heat get to you. Or like byoki ni makeru, it just means like you're sick, you're really sick, you're losing to the sickness, meaning that you are like in your bed, you are feeling like it's just getting the best of you, and you're like really getting owned is what it kind of means. And then it has this B, so I'm not really even sure how this fits in between the 1 and 2, why it's just B. Urushi, kamisuri nazo no tsui shigeki de hifu ga kabureru. I think, okay, yeah, I'm not really sure how this fits in, because there's 1, 2, and then B. Oh, sorry. Okay, I got it. Okay, so then there's 1 in the square brackets, 1 in the curved brackets, 2 in the curved brackets, and then 2 in the curved brackets is broken down into A and B. So then the first one, so it's like A, like definition 1, B, B1, and then B2. So it can be either the one I just said, or to have your skin be not infected, but like inflamed or irritated by either something like either a razor. So it's like, you know, if you cut yourself with a razor, that would mean this, or like you are allergic to something and you have like a skin rash that breaks out because of something that you're allergic to. Then you could say that you makeru, and so both these two are like grouped under the same definition. And then we have this other one that looks more specific. It says urite ga kyaku no tami ni tokubetsu service o suru. So when a seller does special service for a customer. This meaning. Yeah, so it basically means like when someone who's selling something like gives you a bargain and like makes the price cheaper than normally would be. And it has some example sentences. So that was actually pretty difficult. I think this is one of the cases where an easy word has a really hard definition because it's such a simple concept. So the more simple a concept is, the harder it is to explain with language. So another one you had listed as an example was yurusu, I think. So that was like really in-depth. I'll try to go a little bit quicker. So again, all you have to worry about is this one. It's also super common. It's intransitive verb that has godan conjugation. Has a lot of different meanings. So the first one, again, this thing, it means that you're either doing something, you're doing something or someone ni yurusu or something o yurusu. It's kind of just telling you how you would use it. So 必要な注意、警戒を怠る. So to slack on necessary caution or carefulness, you could say. So 心を許す means so like if you say you yurusu your 心を許す, which is like you could say you forgive your own heart. It means that you let down your guard and you like be your real self around someone. So it's like you're letting down your guard, right? Like your keikai is kind of like your guard, your caution. Okotaru. I mean, this puts it in kind of in a negative way because it's okotaru means like to be lazy or to slack on, but and then this one is like tsumi, batsu, gimu などから話してやる、免除する. So this means to let someone off the hook or free someone from either a punishment, a crime, or an obligation. So if you see right here, this is worth noting. It says 話してやる. So this is kind of the form meaning like you're doing a favor for someone. So it's showing that this verb is done by someone with power or with a higher position to someone with who's in a lower position. So when it says right here like zei o yurusu, which I guess would mean that you make it so that someone doesn't have to pay taxes, right? You're like letting them off the hook or making an exception for them. And this one says 希望を聞き入れてしてもいいとする. So it says you accept someone's hope or like request and you let them do something. You make it so that it is okay for them to do. So it says like 入学を許す、出発を許す. So this is kind of just to allow someone to go on a trip or allow someone to enter a school. And then it says やらせまいとしていたことを思うままにやらせる. So to let someone do as much as they would want of something that before you were not letting them do. So やらせまい means like you're trying to not let them do it. You're trying to make sure they don't do it. Oh, and so the parentheses just means that like it means that the stuff in the parenthesis here isn't officially part of the definition, but it usually is part of it. So omo mama ni means like total freedom as they think, right? Meaning like as like whatever they want to do. And so it's just like adding more kind of freedom here. It's like you're letting them do whatever they want. And then if you look at the example sentence, 一遍の謝罪をすることすら彼のプライドが許さなかった. So his pride wouldn't even allow him to give a single apology. So it's kind of weird used in the negative like that. Here it says 横行を許す, which would mean like let someone do a lot of bad, like let them go out and commit a lot of crimes or do a lot of bad things without stopping them. So yeah, then we have 手放しでそうであることを認める. So you are without exception, like unconditionally admitting that something is the case. So 自他ともに許す just means that like all involved parties admit that it is the case. Because jita means you and others. So it's like if someone says like, oh, he's the best baseball player in the world, it's like the player himself thinks that he's the best baseball player, and everyone admits that he's the best baseball player too. So it's like it's not just that he's saying it, it's that everyone admits it. And then 手放しでそうすることを認める. So this would be you unconditionally allow someone to do something. And then it looks like this is the metaphorical usage. So, like here, Zento wa rakkan o yurusanai. So the future, the near future does not allow for optimism. And then it says keshite rakkan dekinai. It just means that the future looks like it's going to be tough. And then right here, so this means this me is not me is for meishi, which means noun, which means in noun form it is yurushi, and it has a pitch accent of 3. It's odaka. And then it even has an example. Aite ni yurushi o motomeru. To seek approval from someone. And then again, it has that in meaning 3, it can also be written like this, but it's not a normal usage. So this is here, one sec. So those, again, that was like a really basic word, so it's like extra abstract in the definition. So here, I'll do one more. You said, for an example, she. And maybe after this I'll do one of my own words that is, I think would be easier. So going back to shinmeikai, we can see it can be ichi or shi. So shi would be like city. It says nigiyaka na machi. So a lively town. And then it has the more technical definition. 地方公共団体の一つ。人口5万以上で都市としての条件を備えているもの。So it is a kind of district's public organization, and it has to have a population of above 50,000 and also meet all the other specific requirements of a toshi. So that's like a technical definition. And then there is also ichi. It says 一定の日にそこで物品を売ったり交換したりすること、場所。デパートなどの大売り出しの名としても用いられる。So, on a set day, so you say a koto or place. So it means either a place, let's just say a place where people either buy and sell or exchange goods. So a place where on a fixed day people buy and exchange goods. And then it says, so what it means here is that the triangle means it could be koto or basho. So koto would mean that it's like the action of buying and selling things at this place, or it can be the place where that happens. And then it has extra detail here. Sometimes they also call, when a department store is having an extra big sale, they also might call it an ichi. And then here we say, 人が大勢集まるところ. So just a place where a lot of people gather together. But this is like a more uncommon one. That's like there's this kotowaza right here, monzen ichi o nasu, which just means that, like, I mean, basically I would say this still means the same one as this, but it's more like metaphorical. So like what this means is basically like what would you call it? A fair or a market, right? Yeah. And so there's this phrase right here, monzen ichi o nasu, which means an ichi forms in front of the door. And what it means is just that like a store is doing extremely well, right? Like let's say you opened up a new ramen shop and it's super popular and there's a super long line in front of the store. So it's basically a metaphor saying that there is a market forming in front of your store, in front of the door. And so it's kind of just a metaphor for a lot of people. So the definition says a lot of people, but the image that I have is still of the first one right here. Or right here, there's this other kotowaza, ichi ni tora o hanatsu. So to let a tiger loose in an ichi, and it just means to do something that's extremely dangerous. But again, it says hito ga oza atsumaru tokoro, but really it's just a metaphor, meaning that it's like as if you went to a market and released a tiger there. So sometimes the second meaning is really just a metaphorical use of the first meaning, but it doesn't like specifically tell you that, which I always thought was kind of annoying because it took me a while to like figure out that that's how it really works. So yeah, so these are they're like really basic concepts, so they're actually a little bit harder. But if you were learning, like, here, let me just pick out a word that's on this page. It might actually be easier, like dantai. That's probably an easier word to learn. So, like right here. 共通の目的を持つ人が集まって作った集団. So, a group of people, or like a group that was formed by people who came together with a common goal, or a common purpose, a shared purpose. So shared people come together, they form an organization, and that's a dantai. Or if we say like kyotsu, this is going to be it's a super abstract word because it means to have something in common, right? That's pretty abstract when you think about it. 二つ以上のものが二つ以上のもののどれにもある、当てはまること。So, with two or more things, there is something within each of those things which exists or fits. So yeah, that's kind of like abstract. Let's see. 二つ以上のもののどれにも当てはまり、通用すること、またそうしたさま。So, like, 通用 means something very similar to kyotsu, so it's not really helping you out that much. It's kind of why Shinmeikai is cool. Let's see. I'll just keep picking up words. Mokuteki, that could be an interesting one. So, 行動する目標として考えられた、そうしたい何事か、なりたい何者か。So this one, mokuteki means something very similar to mokhyo. So if you don't know what mokhyo means, then it's not really going to help you. But because they both kind of mean goal or purpose. The nuance is different, but it would be 行動する目標として考えられた. So something that you want to do or someone who you want to become as a goal, pretty much. Or yeah, that's pretty abstract. Let's see for mokyo. それから外れまい、そこまで届かせようと狙うもの. So either something that you want to not deviate from, or something that you want to reach. So that's pretty good for a goal. That's pretty good. Like either something you want to not deviate from, or something that you want to reach. It's pretty good. That's a good Shinmeikai one, I'd say. So yeah, I mean, I guess when it comes to answering your question, the thing right here is what's most important. These are all just example sentences. This right here, that's the old kana spelling. So kana, the current system of hiragana and katakana was invented after World War II. And before that, they had a less consistent, more messed up spelling system. But they still tell you the old spelling of it sometimes. Same thing with this right here. So you can ignore that. The triangle just means that it can be either what's right after the triangle, or what's in the parentheses, either one. For Shinmeikai, that's really all you need to know, I feel like. Like here, we just have spelling, pitch, accent, the word, sentence, example sentence. If there's like any other weird stuff that doesn't really make sense, you can just kind of ignore it. Let's see. Maybe I'll do like one more. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the more complicated the word, the more simple the definition. So, like, here, let me look at things that I wanted to look up. This actually might be pretty interesting. So, like here. Here's a super uncommon word that Japanese people probably don't know, but I might make a card for. And, 焦って苛立つこと。またその気持ち. So, to become impatient and frustrated. Or that type of emotion. So that's really simple, right? Because I already know what aseru means. I know what iradatsu means. I know what kimochi means. So that's super simple, right? And they're almost all the same. Kokoro iratataseru koto. Asette iradatsu koto. Let's see. I think this was aeru. So, 野菜、魚介などを酢、味噌、ごまなどと混ぜること. So to take either fish or vegetables and mix them together with vinegar, miso, or goma. I don't know how to say goma in English, but I know what it means in Japanese. So it's just like a cooking term, which just means to mix food together. 投函し物事をなおざりにすること、注意を払わずないがしろにすること。So to like neglect something, to not pay attention to something and neglect it. To handle it without care and to neglect it. It's like super easy to understand. Kazetsu, like Kazet, Zekka. Oh, I didn't even read. My mind flipped the kanji around. Zekka, 非常に優れていること。So super good. 素晴らしい様子。景色が。So something is extremely wonderful. Normally used on things kind of like a view. 景色。風景などが優れて美しい。So things like a view or something that you're seeing is magnificent and beautiful. So let's see. So like a lot of these are like, so you really can kind of see that once you learn all the basic words, it gets super easy. Like 覆いかぶせること. So to like cover and wear on your head. Or here, like 包むように全体にかぶせること. So to cover something with completely, basically. Like to wrap something around and cover it completely. Let's see. This word is pretty funny. It means to like hire someone based off of their face because you find them attractive. I mean, I know what a lot of these mean, but I just wanted to kind of learn the exact definition or like this one. 笑って相手にしないこと、一緒に伏すこと. So to laugh at someone and not take them seriously. 大いに笑, this one says there's two meanings. 大いに笑わせること、笑って相手にしないこと. So to laugh really hard or to laugh and then not take someone seriously. And then here it says the kanji for kill is just used to like make the meaning sound stronger, to emphasize the meaning. It doesn't actually mean kill. 古格、昔のやり方、古くからの格式、これ. So the old way of doing things. The way of doing things that has been around from a long time. 昔から伝えられている由緒のあるやり方. The old traditional way of doing things that has been passed on from a long time ago. So, like, yeah, these are super easy to understand. 不結果 just be like 結果が出ないこと、好ましくない結果が出ること、結果が思わしくないこと、思わしくない結果、不守備、結果が思わしくないこと. So the result is undesirable, or that result. 害、自分の考えを押し通そうとする気持ち、わがまま。自分の思ったことを何でも正しいものとしてそれを変えようとしない気持ち。So, the feeling you have of wanting to push your agenda forward, or your feeling of believing that your opinion is correct and definitely not wanting to change it. Your feeling of wanting to push forward your agenda. So yeah, you can kind of see that these are all these ones I just looked up. See how short they are. They're so much more simple, whereas the ones we looked up, like shi or like yurusu makeru, they were way more difficult. And that's the thing, is that when you first try to make the monolingual transition, you're normally still kind of a beginner. And so there's still a lot of common words you don't know yet. And so when you're looking up a word you don't know, it's like still kind of a common word, or not a common word, but a basic concept. And those are the hardest to define. So then it makes you feel like, oh, what? I'm never going to be able to go monolingual. These definitions are so difficult. But you just got to keep in mind that most words have super easy definitions, and the words you're looking up probably just happen to be really difficult. So don't get discouraged. Just keep up with it. And remember that if you can handle these definitions of like makeru and yurusu, then it's going to be a breeze for you to function monolingually. So again, if you're having really struggling with any single one definition, just skip it and go on, because there's a good chance that you just got unlucky and you're on one that's like unreasonably difficult. And yeah, hope that was useful. Kind of was really just all over the place, but yeah, I'll have more specific, organized kind of tutorials in the future, but maybe that was insightful, maybe not. We'll see. Anyway, talk to you guys in the future, and thanks for supporting me.